everybody, and welcome to another board game discussion video. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's been brought up in several different contexts for me, and so I was like, hey, let's make a video about it. I've been talking to people about it on my YouTube channel. I talked about it with several people at my FLGS, as well as people who have come for game nights, and even just like some of my friends and co-workers just randomly at work when they ask me about board games and stuff. Today I am going to be talking all about collecting. I'm going to talk about what it is I collect, why I collect, how other people collect, all sorts of different stuff. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. Before I get started though, please, if you haven't done so already, take a look at my Facebook and my Twitter pages. Those are great ways to keep in touch with me. Plus, I post contests and giveaways, new videos, fun articles, all sorts of different things. And you guys know, as always, I love hearing from you. So, today's topic, talking about collections. How much is too much? How much is too little? All of that kind of thing. I wanted to make a few key points here. First and foremost, I wanted to talk to you guys about my personal philosophy on board game collections and what I've got, why I've got it, all that kind of stuff. The next thing I wanted to really discuss was what I've heard other people do and how they work and what I know, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting and I can see that and all that kind of stuff. And third, I just wanted to sort of talk generally about board game collecting and my philosophy on that aspect, like having board games as a collection, essentially. All right? So first and foremost, my game collection. I've got right about 220 or so total games, including expansions. Only about 180 or so are actual like board games, like on their own and that kind of thing. And you might be saying, wow, that's quite a few. But the fact is that I've actually, I've got a decent collection, don't get me wrong, but I know a lot of people who have a whole lot more than I do. We're talking about like 300, 400, 500 games. Absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. And then of course there are plenty of people who have fewer than me. And it just depends. Like I'm really sort of middle of the road as far as like a pretty serious gamer. So one interesting philosophy or philosophical question that came up on some of the forums I've been looking at was, are we gamers, or like are we players, or are we collectors? And it's a really good question, because the fact is you can't tell too well, but a decent number of games on my shelf are actually still in shrink. I haven't even bothered to open them yet. And it was like, maybe I saw it and I really enjoyed the theme, or it was just really inexpensive, so I was just like, hey, why not? I'll pick it up and just see how it goes and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different reasons for it, but the fact is I haven't punched it out or even opened it. Some of them, maybe I saw a review or something like that, but by and large it's because of theme. As you guys know, if you watched my videos before, that's what really grabs me, is if I see something that I'm like, yes, like it's about science, or it's about, like sci-fi, some kind of thematic element that I really enjoy, I'm going to grab it pretty much as soon as I can. So for my philosophy, I've been asked several times, like, okay, Danny, when do you decide to get rid of a game? How do you know that it's time to sell or trade it away or whatever it happens to be? And honestly, I have never ever done that. I have never had a reason to get rid of any game whatsoever. And you might be kind of surprised by that when I have talked on my channel about games like this guy right here, Dexter, which I have held up many times as one of the worst games I have ever played in my entire life. And it's true. Like, it honestly is. It's a bad game. I don't enjoy playing it. I don't enjoy introducing people to it. I don't like doing it, any of that kind of thing. There's a few reasons that I've kept it though. First and foremost is that I really enjoy Dexter. I just like the IP. I like the idea of having a game about the Dexter books and TV shows, and it's something that I can point out to people and be like, oh yeah, look, I got the Dexter board game, and they're like, oh cool, I didn't know that there was a Dexter board game. Because most of the time when I'm playing games, I'm playing with like my coworkers and just like my sort of more general non-gamer friends. So it's good to have stuff like this that people will recognize easily, even if it's a giant crap fest, right? Not to mention the fact that I'm in a relatively unique situation of making videos. So it's good for me to have as many games as I can so that I can actually physically show you guys the box and stuff. Now, that's sort of an aside, though, and again, it's a very unique thing for me personally. But that said, That's why I try to keep everything that I can. However, at some point, I will run out of physical space, right? Right now, I have thankfully not had to deal with that, and the thing is that it's kind of nice because you can see I've got like sort of a cool backdrop in the form of just a whole bunch of board games, right? But again, relatively unique because I happen to make board game videos, so it just works out nicely. But the biggest reason for me, and the reason why I like keeping all the games and having them, is I am very much about preparedness and options, and that's really what it boils down to. Like, especially if I'm bringing in new people who have never played board games, I want them to have options for a theme, the amount of time to play, the complexity, whether it's how many decisions you have to make, the strategic value, anything along those lines. I want to have options for literally every aspect for any game. You know, do we want to just do like a fun little party game that really doesn't require a lot of thought? Do we want to do something a little bit more in-depth and complex? Do we want to do something that's, you know, like sort of a dipping your toes in the water, you know, like a Seven Wonders or something like that? Good game, quick game, and it can introduce some strategy. You know, there's a lot of different options with it, and that's the biggest reason why I like to keep all my board games, because I say it's better to have it and not need it than it is to need it and not have it. And again, I have not had a particular reason to get rid of board games. I know a lot of people, when you move, if you move to a smaller space, it's like, well, crap, I've got all these board games, I got to get rid of at least some. Or maybe you just need money. You know, whatever it happens to be. Again, I've been lucky in that sense that I haven't really had to worry about it. One of the other big philosophies for me personally is, how did I get the game? Again, I mentioned I've got some games that are still in shrink, right? Because I'm just like, meh, you know, well, I mean, most of the time I just bought them for really cheap because they happen to be on sale, like Barnes & Noble sales. Awesome way to get board games, and then I don't open them for months or longer potentially. But a lot of times, like if my friends and family get me board games, I'm never going to get rid of those. Like it just doesn't make any sense, because those have a specific nostalgia attached to them, and I just can't bring myself to get rid of them because they have more sentimental value to me than they ever could monetarily. It just doesn't make sense. And I mean, I don't care whether or not the people would see whether or not I still have the games. It's just a way to show that other people have shown that they care about me and they understand I love board games. You know, stuff like that. There's another reason that I do this, but I'll get to it in just a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about what other people have done that I've seen. Most of the people who have more games than I do, so we're talking about, you know, 300-400 games, a lot of times they'll have like a one in, one out rule, where if you buy a new game and you want to keep it, then you need to get rid of another game, right? So they have sort of like a cap. And once they've reached that cap, then it's like, okay, we got to trade them out. And I think that's kind of cool. I really like that, and I'm probably going to end up doing that because I think it works nicely. And most of the people I know who do it base it off of like maybe a mechanical theme or a mechanic or a theme or whatever it happens to be. For example, let's say you get a new deck builder. Let's say you get the Harry Potter deck builder game, which I happen to have. And it's like, okay, I really enjoy this game, I want to keep it. So do you get rid of like a fantasy game? Or do you get rid of another deck builder game? You know, that sort of mentality, because then you still maintain the balance as far as what you have available, the options, and the diversity of the options, while at the same time you're keeping a game that you find better. And that's sort of the other side of that particular coin, where it's just a straight up comparison, where it's like, well, this game is really similar to this other one, and do I enjoy the new one more? If I enjoy the new one more, get rid of the old one, right? So that's really what it boils down to. Again, a lot of people do that, and I can appreciate it. Another thing that I have noted for several people is just that, frankly, they are more selective in terms of what games they buy and when they buy them. One friend of mine, he refuses to buy a game until he has played it at least 3 times, because let's face it, you want to have replayability in all the games in your collection. You want to be able to at any time take it off the shelf and it feels like a good fresh sort of game. For me personally, that's one of the advantages of having quite a few, because I can sort of rotate them in and out. And you know, if I get bored of a game for whatever reason, just take it out of the rotation for a couple of months and then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that, and then bring it back in. So you know, have fun in that sense. But for some people, if you want to limit yourself to, you know, 30, 40, 50 games, if even that, you know, you can go even fewer, then maybe you want to make certain that you're going to enjoy and play every single one of them. Right? That's an advantage regardless. So that's what one of my friends does, because, you know, you play it one time, wow, this is awesome. Play it a second time, kind of felt like the first time. Play it a third time, okay, this is the same game every time, I don't want it. You know, something along those things. And that's an unfortunate experience that he actually had, where he bought a game after playing it only once, and then he realized that it was basically the same thing over and over. So he was kind of like, meh. And I think he got rid of it, if I'm not mistaken. But again, that's just other people's philosophy in terms of the games. And you know, other people, maybe they only collect a specific theme or a specific mechanic. One of my other friends that I play with fairly frequently really only collects worker placement, and that is what she loves. That is what she does, and we all know that, like, you know, if you're going to play with her, then you're probably going to end up playing a worker placement. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's her game collection. She does whatever she wants, but that means that it's relatively small, which is good. You know, not everybody can have a whole bunch of board games, so you do whatever it is that you can, right? Another sort of mentality, or I guess strategy, that I've seen with other gamers has been similar to what people do with mostly new Nintendo consoles, which is to buy as many as they possibly can for the sole reason of wanting to sell them. And more often than not, this will happen with Kickstarters, especially big miniature-based Kickstarters, so like Conan and Scythe and some of these kinds of things. You just afterwards, you saw them on eBay and stuff for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like way more than they actually paid for them and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate to see that. Thankfully, I don't know anybody personally who does this, but I've seen, like, I'm part of like buy sell trade like forums and stuff like that, and I'll see people who have like boxes and boxes lined up, just like you see on eBay when like the Wii and the Wii U were released. You see sort of that same type of thing, and people saying like, yeah, we're gonna buy this, we're gonna do this, it's gonna be awesome, blah 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 blah. And I'm just kind of like, really? Like, what? Like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And okay, you're doing it to make money, that's great, but then I wonder, you know, are you a gamer? Maybe, who knows? Does it really matter? No, it doesn't. But at the same time, it's just another reason that people will sort of collect, is just for the sole purpose of buying something just to resell it. So people will do that even at like the Barnes & Noble sales and stuff like that, because you'll buy games for, you know, like 75% off or whatever, and then you can turn around and sell it for at least a modest profit, maybe not too much, but still. So it's just another sort of mentality that I've seen. Again, not really in person, at least not to a great extent, but I have seen people do it. I personally don't mind, you know, to each their own, but I just wanted to mention it really briefly. Last but not least, just a little bit more about board game collecting and my general philosophy in that sense. One thing that I talked to with one of my coworkers recently was he was asking me about comic books versus board games, because it's like, oh well, yeah, like you can collect comic books and you know, then you can sell them for a whole bunch of money, and because they become rare and all that kind of stuff. And same thing, just a little while ago, somebody was talking to me about Magic the Gathering, which is exactly the same. You know, you've got the, what's it called, the Pieces of Nine, I think is the name of it, which includes the Black Lotus, and you know, you're talking thousands of dollars for a single card and stuff like that. So I was talking to him and I was like, well, you know, board games really don't have that level of collectivity. They just don't. You know, I mean, relatively recently I saw a post where I don't think it was a prototype, but it was like one of the very first editions of Diplomacy from the estate sale of the guy who developed the game. And so it was like his copy of the game, and I think it ended up going for like $900 or $1,000. Whereas, you know, like comic books, you're talking about potentially millions and millions of dollars. So there is a huge disparity between them, and I think it's mostly because board gaming is much more niche compared to some other things. But at the same time, like several of the games that I have are out of print. So I'm not going to get rid of those. I mean, by and large, I really enjoy them, but I'm not going to get rid of them because I know that I would never be able to get another copy if I end up regretting the decision. Perfect example is Cash and Guns. I've got the first edition of Cash and Guns. Absolutely love it. Tons of fun. Great game. And for my birthday, somebody got me the Yakuza expansion, which is really difficult to get. So I was super excited about it, and I am never getting rid of either one. Not only did somebody buy it for me because they got me the Yakuza expansion, but it's also out of print, and so I know I'd never be able to find it again. And things of that nature. And one example I wanted to show you was actually the very, very first game, or close to the first game that I reviewed, which was Mining Maniac, right? Now I know most of you have more than likely never ever heard of this game, even if you watch my channel fairly religiously. I believe this was the second or third game that I reviewed. This was a Kickstarter game, and the company was launching a Kickstarter, and so they sent me a copy to review and discuss. But the Kickstarter failed. They didn't reach the funding goal, and so the game has not actually been released. So this is only one of, maybe 50 or so copies of the game that exists. That doesn't mean it's worth anything, but at the same time, it's just a cool thing to have on my shelf. And I'm just like, wow, I've got this game that really doesn't exist pretty much anywhere else. So that type of thing is very, very rare for me because, companies aren't sending me games all the time. But at the same time, it's a unique thing, and so I don't want to get rid of unique, interesting, different kinds of games, just like I don't want to get rid of out-of-print games and all that kind of stuff. I'm not in it for the collector value. I'm not in it for monetary value because I know, by and large, it's not there. It doesn't exist. But I do have very much the collector mindset, and I want to have a whole bunch of games. I want to have all those options. At some point, though, I'm going to have to start making decisions because I'm going to run out of physical space. However, thankfully, that's not going to be for a little while. But that's going to be it for me today, you guys. I hope that you all enjoyed this video. As always, and particularly today, please let me know what you think about this topic. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. What are your sort of rules for collecting? How do you do it? Do you go by a specific theme, a mechanic? Are you more like me where you just sort of go a little bit willy-nilly and then you're kind of like, whoa, I got a bunch of board games. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, as always. But with that, thank you so very much again for watching, and I will see you next time.